On behalf of the Southeast New England Program Network, welcome to our first webinar for the SNEP Leadership Exchange on incorporating green infrastructure for stormwater and other co-benefits. My name is Tess Clark. I'm joining you from the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. We are a SNEP partner, and I'm happy to be assisting with the logistics for today's program. For those of you that have joined SNEP webinars before, today's webinar is a little different than usual. We will be showcasing the amazing work that's happening in the SNEP Leadership Exchange, which you'll learn about shortly. But before we get to that, there are a few logistics to keep in mind. So first, everyone will be on mute to ensure audio quality. You will be able to ask questions by typing them into the questions box on your GoToWebinar question panel, also pictured here on the slide. We really look forward to answering your questions, so please type them in at any time. Now for a little bit about the SNEP network. You can see a map of the Southeast New England program region here. The SNEP network's mission is to empower communities to achieve healthy watersheds, sustainable financing, and long-term climate resilience through management of stormwater and restoration projects. This webinar series is one of the ways that we really strive to serve this region. And if you want to know more, you can check out snepnetwork.org. On that note, I'd like to turn things over to Joanne Throw, President of Throw Environmental and Senior Fellow at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. Joanne, take it away.
Thanks, Tess, and welcome everyone. I'm very excited about this webinar. It is the first, as Tess said, it is our first time that we're able to share with you about the Leadership Exchange. Everything was being planned, and then, as with everyone else, COVID hit, and we were a little sidetracked in trying to get this reorganized. So we've shifted the format a little bit, and we've made this a three-part series. The first part being a podcast where hopefully everybody has listened to the podcast in preparation for this webinar. And then the next thing we did is we had a closed session. And our closed session really allowed for a great dialogue between our invited communities and Wareham, which I'll talk about in a minute. But first, I want to just share some of the goals for this Leadership Exchange. You're going to see this throughout the next few years with the SNEP network, but we're very excited that we can bring opportunities for creating revenue streams and fostering peer-to-peer exchanges across the region, and really bring it home to about water quality improvements, but also climate resilience. And so we feel it's very important that we bring communities from outside, both inside our SNEP region, but also outside, and really share examples of what it took to finance and fund projects and what leadership skills they brought to some of their projects, and also really focus on different aspects of stormwater improvement. And today, we focused on green infrastructure. We'll talk later on about the other webinars coming up focusing on different elements, but we wanted to focus on the needs that were identified in our first community, which is Wareham, Massachusetts. And Wareham, as you'll hear shortly, has this vision of better before the bridge. They're in the Cape Cod area, and their goal is to connect economic development and climate resilience planning into some of their design plans for downtown. So they wanted to incorporate environmentally sensitive design and green infrastructure elements into their redevelopment plans by learning from others. And they are the first community we selected to work with. So we're very excited to welcome them here. And from the town of Wareham, representing Wareham, is Kenneth Buckland. He has been our prime point of contact, and Ken has been the town of Wareham's Director of Planning and Community Development since 2016. And he, I tell you, he is the man about town there, because he is also the clerk for Wareham's Redevelopment Authority, who is working so closely with us in Wareham. So I'm also joined by a couple colleagues who are helping me from the SNEP network. They're working with Throw Environmental, and I have Dan Neese, who I've been working with, since 2005 on and off. He is the president of the Center for Resilience Innovation, an environmental nonprofit organization, and he's also a senior fellow with me at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. And the amazing, I mean, really amazing Kyle Gray. Kyle is currently a candidate for Master's of Arts in Marine Affairs. He's also a graduate of he has a graduate certificate in community planning from URI, and I don't know what I'd do without Kyle in my life, so he's just been so amazing. We have special guests today. We have the City of Lancaster, and we have the town of Provincetown bringing their examples of leadership and green infrastructure. And so I am thrilled to have the former mayor of the City of Lancaster, Mayor Rick Gray. And Rick is a defense attorney by training and was elected as mayor of Lancaster City in 2006. He served 3 terms there in office until he retired in 2018. And he, as I like to say, the dynamic duo, as I was able to, Dan and I worked with Charlotte and Rick for a long time, and knowing what great examples they had. And Charlotte Katzenmoyer, she served as the other part of that dynamic duo. She is the former Lancaster City Director of Public Works from 2001 to 2018. Overseeing the city's successful green infrastructure program, and you'll hear more about that. It truly was successful, amazing example nationally. So Charlotte is now the CEO of Capital Region Water in Harrisburg. So from Provincetown, bringing it close by, we have Richard Waldo. Richard is he has served as the Provincetown's Director of Public Works since 2012. In his years with the town, Richard has led several environmentally friendly projects, including installation of porous pavement for the town and their work on Main Street that we're going to talk about. And then we have Russ Kleekamp. Russ is a project manager at GHD Consulting Services, which is a private consulting firm based in Hyannis, Massachusetts. He's has a couple decades of experience and he knows Wareham very well. So we had a wonderful conversation with these people and a larger group from Wareham. As I said, it was a closed session. What I want to do is, before I talk about some of the takeaways from our leadership exchange and share with all of you, I want to ask Kyle, the amazing Kyle, to talk a little bit about the highlights. We're going to go through the highlights of each of the communities. And then what we will do is just have a discussion and talk about a little bit more detail of what came out of this morning's session. Maybe, Kyle, how about I start with Wareham and ask Ken to give a description, a much broader description of what's going on to set the stage for Wareham before I turn it to Kyle. Ken, are you good with that?
Sure am, Joanne. Let me start off by saying thank you, and this is a great opportunity. What I want to give you to do is give you a little context about what Wareham is all about. We're 24,000 people. We double in size in the summer. We're an open town meeting, town administrator, board of selectmen form of government. We make decisions twice a year. We have a tax rate that's less than 11 mils and another 2 mils for water and fire district, and a 3% surcharge on the Community Preservation Act for affordable housing, open space, recreation, and historic preservation. Our tax base is about 80% residential, 11% commercial, and 2% industrial. So with a population that's aging, we're a classic coastal New England community. That somewhat differentiates us as well, too, since we have 54 miles of coastline adjacent to Buzzards Bay, a great recreational resource. We're also at the intersection of 2 interstate highways, so we are able to grow our commercial and industrial base as well. Our home prices are lower than around the Boston area and other parts of the Southeast region. So we have an opportunity for people to move in, and COVID has made the real estate market hot. So we have essentially a Cape Cod lifestyle without the traffic going over the bridges, which is why we branded our town with the slogan, "It's better before the bridges." It's a blue collar town, but it voted for a new combined elementary school on a tax override. We established a redevelopment authority with the full powers that they enjoy. But what we wanted to do was leverage the private capital as much as possible. We see an opportunity that comes from the people in the town meeting that have shown that time and again that they're open to change and significant development. Our aspirations are cataloged in the Economic Development Strategy commissioned by the Redevelopment Authority, which identified 4 areas for action: the downtown, Onset Village, the Route 28 Strip Corridor, and the industrial parks. We brought in a Urban Land Institute technical assistance panel to suggest a program for the downtown. And that's where our preferred approach is to investing in the future. We'd like to use private capital as much as possible, make some infrastructure improvements, and pass the zoning to encourage that investment. The question is how we're going to find funds for that infrastructure improvements through grants, TIF, DIF, whatever. We're limited in resources. We only have about $600,000 in the bank, and CB block grant funds coming in about $850,000 a year. We're a semi-entitlement community. In the meantime, we have other programs that have demanded increased funding and administrative program demands that have pulled us away from a focus on the downtown. But the infrastructure needs are improvements to the sewer system, drainage, parking deck, possibly at the MBTA train station, a combination of waterfront walkway and sea level rise barrier, because we've done our municipal vulnerability assessment and found that it's a real issue in the downtown. We'd like to have mixed use development, and we see an opportunity in using our town-owned land, the Merchants Way, to encourage the kind of development that would be market-based and would improve the downtown significantly. So that's our hope, and we're trying to figure out how to make it happen.
Thanks, Ken. Perfect. And our hope is not just to influence Wareham, but also other listeners from this webinar. There's so much great information that occurs with these closed sessions and the dialogue between communities, and we really wanted to share that information. But first, it's good for everybody to get context of our invited communities. And I thought, Kyle, you did such a great job on the podcast. So how about you just set the stage for us on the 2 invited communities?
Sounds good. Thanks, Joanne, and good afternoon, everyone. So we already got a bunch of good information from Ken, so I won't spend too much time looking back at Wareham. But yeah, so if you want to start on this slide, so Wareham's looking for downtown redevelopment in that Wareham Village area. And as you can see right here, we're really close to the river, and sea level is continuing to rise. So as this continues to happen and storms become more frequent, the low-lying assets are, facing increasing risk. But even with the environmental challenges that we have in Wareham, there's definitely room for opportunity, and there's potential for economic growth. And green infrastructure is a great way to kind of seize that opportunity and capitalize on that growth. So we turned to 2 case studies on green infrastructure to hear some of their lessons learned, and we brought those back to Wareham and hopefully to some other communities. So first up, we have Lancaster City. If we can go to that slide, thank you. So Lancaster was first driven to deal with stormwater because of combined sewer systems. It was polluting the Conestoga River, and that made its way down to the Chesapeake Bay. But rather than limiting to green infrastructure to just standalone projects, we really saw the team in Lancaster with Mayor Gray and Charlotte Katzenmoyer lead the initiative to make green infrastructure part of the city's long-term strategy. So through green infrastructure, Lancaster was able to do a number of different things. They developed the local brew pub that you see in the top photo, combining stormwater with public art projects as well. They enhanced parks and neighborhood conditions with that basketball court that we see on the left and that we featured in the podcast. And they addressed transportation and walkability improvements, all while addressing the primary benefit of pollution that was going to the Chesapeake Bay. We see another example in Provincetown. If we could move to that slide. Thank you. All right. So in Provincetown, they were driven to address stormwater for a similar reason. There were beach closures due to pollution, and shellfishing was also facing some issues. Provincetown embarked on a multi-phase project, 4 phases of which are already done and 1 of which is still in design. And it repaved the downtown main travel artery with porous asphalt. So starting in 2012, DPW Director Rich Waldo and consulting engineer Russ Kleekamp, both of whom we have with us today, they led Provincetown's first porous pavement project. And with close communication between the town and the town residents, and meticulous attention paid to detail and things like design, planning, maintenance, and construction, the project's been a large success. So with that, we have a couple slides from Russ Kleekamp if he wants to talk for a few minutes about the Commercial Street project.
Sure, thanks, Kyle. So what you're looking at here for Commercial Street, I won't go too deep into the design aspects, but I thought it was important to show a schematic of the cross section of the porous asphalt just so folks understand how it works. So the porous asphalt is basically regular asphalt with the smaller aggregate removed out of it that creates voids. Underneath the about 4 to 6 inches of the porous asphalt, we want to put a larger stone course that can rapidly accept water once it gets through the asphalt, because if the water freezes in the asphalt, that can lead to a lot of damage of the asphalt. And then underneath that stone course, we have the native subbase. In the case of Provincetown, it's basically on a sandbar, so we had excellent material for infiltration. Now, one of the concerns with Commercial Street is you had properties very close to the sidewalk, so something that kind of kept me up at night early on is, all right, if we put all this water in the roadway and we have groundwater about 4 feet below grade, are we going to start flooding out the basements of these, or even the crawl spaces of these properties that were built in the, some of them are in the late 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s. So we came up, if you see on the schematic, with a design where we lined the sides of the roadway with an impermeable liner. That's the red dotted line you're looking at. So design worked out very, very well for this application. Next slide. These are just some before and after pictures. It's always with these projects, it's always good to look at the before and after. If you look at the top left, a real quick, one of the more humorous stories with the project, we sent a questionnaire out to all the abutting residents on Commercial Street. And one of the questions was, do you have a flooding problem? I got the picture on the above left mailed back to me with the yellow sticky that says, what do you think? So I appreciate the brutal honesty, and we worked very closely with that business owner. She owned an art gallery on Commercial Street, and you can see the bottom pictures underneath that to the left and the right. The left is before, the right is after. We were able to reset the bricks, put in redundant drains, come up with a decorative granite curb / brick raised feature that separated the private property from the roadway. And it was great working with the residents. The photographs on the right, one of the things that we started to see in the phases 3 and 4, especially as this project went on and on, was a significant investment on behalf of the private property owners and the business owners. For example, the town came through and put all this time and effort into reconstructing the roadway. Well, all the residents that abutted it also took the time to update their properties, refresh the gardens, put in new aesthetic touches. You can see the 2 examples. In Provincetown, every property has its own little design, and it's really spectacular to see it in May and June when everything's in full bloom. It's a great place to be. Next slide. And this one just represents, this slide here just represents some of the environmental benefits. Provincetown has public beaches that go almost the entire span of Commercial Street. It's sampled by the Barnstable County Department of Health. So these are the beach closures on average that you see. You have anywhere from 8, 9, 10, 11, close to 20 beach closures. You can see after year 2012, that was when phase 1 was completed, then phase 2, and then phase 3. So our initial reduction in beach closures was significant. I mean, it was over, I believe, 80%, which really exceeded the expectations of engineer, owner, everybody. It just worked out fantastic. We do have current information from 2016 on through 2020 that still shows a great benefit or a great improvement to the water quality. And as such, some of the shellfishing has been reopened to Provincetown Harbor, which is the direct water body that this porous asphalt is draining to. So it really speaks to the power of green infrastructure. It really does work. It's not just a bunch of hocus pocus that us engineers are trying to, spread to the masses. It's really just a great step forward in the world of stormwater treatment.
Great, thanks so much, Russ.
Welcome.
So yeah, with both Lancaster and Provincetown, we're seeing common keys to success. And these themes were central to all of the research that we have done, the podcast that we recorded, and the conversation that we had earlier today. So with that, I'll turn it back to Joanne to tell us a bit more about that conversation and to fill us in on some of our key takeaways.
Sure. Okay, we can take down the slide tests because the rest of the time now, what I want to do is I'm going to jump to the end of the story. So this morning, at the end of our leadership exchange, I asked all of our guests some key takeaways, some things that they would like to share with Wareham, moving forward, lessons learned and whatnot. And I think that it does us well to hear those things, but put them in context of some key items that I took away from today. So here, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to read this because there were too many good points and I don't want to mess this up. So from me, my takeaways were, in order to maximize the outcomes of green infrastructure, you do need to tie it to something bigger and gain those efficiencies. If you're spending, X amount of dollars on a single project, try to tie it to other projects or, co-benefits like roads or public safety, walkability. We heard about the aesthetics and even the arts in Lancaster, economic development, huge opportunities there. Really try to stretch your dollars. With standalone projects, green infrastructure, we talked a lot this morning about funding and financing. And, green infrastructure is harder to find on the smaller single projects, but when, as grants are very competitive, but funders love to see those multiple benefits tied to things like stormwater, complete streets. They really want to see a plan. They want to see a vision. They want to know you have skin in the game. And there has to be a level of commitment from leadership. So speaking of leadership, one thing we saw this morning was, both examples, our guests today from Lancaster and Provincetown, they had leadership. They had partnerships, be it with consultants, be it strong staff expertise and engagement, but also at the mayoral level. You had to have that person who was going to help be the spokesperson, drive the change, but get the work done as well. And then our guest community really made a green infrastructure part of their DNA. It's something, especially as we'll hear from Lancaster, it was part of their community's way of thinking. It became second nature to them. And about identifying the projects that were right for the town. Dan, let me start with you. Some key takeaways from you that you heard this morning that I didn't already mention.
Sure. Well, our focus on this part of the SNEP project is finance and how things actually get put on the ground. And obviously, every community that's trying to address environmental issues and incorporate green infrastructure into the response to those issues is trying to reduce the fiscal impact that it will have on their community. And the best way to do that is to ensure that the projects you put on the ground actually help economic and commercial activity within the community, as well as the quality of life for the residents. And both Provincetown and Lancaster City exemplify that approach. And so if you're really going to be successful financing, you have to do what these communities did and are continuing to do, which is directly link green infrastructure implementation into your economic development activities, and it's worked very well. On the flip side of financing is funding. There has to be some investment that is supporting, or some funding that is supporting these investments. And communities are often looking to grant funding, either state or federal, to help reduce the impact. And what we've seen again from both of these communities is, if you're going to be successful bringing in state and federal grants and even philanthropic grants, you'd better have some of your own skin in the game, and the impetus for the investment must be coming from the communities. And this is a very difficult thing, certainly in my career, to convince communities to do, which is understand that ultimately the community is responsible, and the more that responsibility they take in the financing activity, the more likely they will incentivize investment from these grant programs. And again, this morning we saw direct evidence that this is the case from these two communities. And I think obviously this was a project that was directly targeted to Wareham. And I think it was a genuine lesson learned, not just for us, but for the community of Wareham also, about how to approach the problem.
Thanks, Dan. Kyle, how about you? Any takeaways from this morning?
Yeah, I have about, I guess, 3 that really stuck with me. I think it was Rich from Provincetown who emphasized the importance of continuously doing projects. So not letting any delays kill the momentum, and really pushing things forward so the community can see progress happening. So that ties directly into my second one, which is that the public can be adverse to change if they're not aware of what's going on, or if they're not properly informed. So in Provincetown, we saw, all of the outreach that was going on. So that was tremendous to keep the public engaged. And in Lancaster, I mean, that whole, whole green infrastructure program was tied into the community. If you've ever been on their website, I mean, it's a great way to navigate, what they're doing, what they're planning to do. So keeping the public informed, through continuous projects, pilot projects, or demonstrations is a great way to get the ball rolling and to keep it rolling. And then finally, I think it was Russ with his engineering hat on. We're thinking you have to pick projects that are appropriate for your town capacity and for the community that you're in. So, you have to focus to make sure that the engineering solutions fit the geography of your town, but you also have to make sure that you can, have the town capacity to implement the project, but maybe even more importantly, to maintain it over time. Because otherwise you're just, spending money without proper maintenance. So those are the 3 big ones that stuck with me.
Those are great. Okay, so Ken, I'm not going to call on you yet because I'm going to go to you later. So you get to sit back and listen. And for the next, let's see, we've got 25 minutes. I want a discussion. I want to hear from P-Town and Lancaster, everything we heard this morning. And if you don't mind, really, I'm going to tee you up. I'm going to start with you, Rick. Mayor Gray, we talked this morning, like, what was the driver? Why did you take this on, green infrastructure? You come in and this is just such a big part of your administration, and you've got Charlotte who is here to help you, but talk a little bit about what some of the drivers were that motivated you for this green infrastructure platform. You got to unmute, Rick.
Yourself, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm not a mutant, I guess. When I came into office, our infrastructure hadn't really been dealt with for a long time. It's a very old city, one of the oldest inland cities in the United States, and it was showing its age. So we decided that we were going to improve things. In making that decision, green infrastructure was brought up because of a number of reasons. One, the EPA was looking at us very closely, but 2, we knew it was the right thing to do with a combined stormwater wastewater system. When it would rain heavily, our treatment plant couldn't handle it, and we would just dump raw sewage into a river that went to the Susquehanna, that went to the Chesapeake. So it was irresponsible what we were doing. On the other hand, how to solve it. If we wanted to separate the systems, it was billions of dollars. I used to tell people we could put in a subway system while we do it too. It was impossible. So how to deal with this problem? Green infrastructure. How did we get to green infrastructure? We made a general rule that any project done by Public Works would be reviewed for green infrastructure. And it didn't mean you'd spend a fortune on it. Provincetown, it was a very big, huge project. But this just might be, for example, if you're going to do new sidewalks, do infiltration in the sidewalks. If you're going to do a new park, make sure there's green infrastructure in the park, and make sure that people relate the park to green infrastructure. So again, to be brief, it was a question of how do you improve the infrastructure? And as you improve the infrastructure, how do you include green infrastructure, no matter how large or how small, in those improvements?
Thanks, Rick. So Rich, I wanna ask you. You had emphasized during our discussion the importance of continuous projects, not letting delays kill momentum. Could you talk a little bit more about that? What you meant?
Sure, Joanne. I think, some of the things that we talked this morning was, getting consensus for some of these projects, educating the public, getting them to stand behind some of these projects. And once you're able to get a project in motion, you got that backing of that community that you really need to build upon. And so once they start seeing things, they want to see more. And it's nice to have a second project ready to go and ready to put before them for funding opportunities immediately once you get done the prior project. So for us in Provincetown, we were able to build phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 by basically getting the ball rolling with phase 1. As soon as they saw the project, as soon as they saw that their community could carry on such a project of that magnitude in a relatively difficult time period and keep our tourism season going, they were on board, and it helped us sell the second and third phases. And then when you look at the green infrastructure element of it, it was very educational for our community. I remember the very first time we laid down the porous pavement, people looking at it saying, what is that? Is that the final product? I haven't seen that before. And it became a very educational thing. We're able to talk about it more and people absorbed it more. And so it really brought the community together. And that's where I was getting at that context of, you work so hard to get that momentum, keep it going.
Thanks, Rich. Charlotte, I want to turn to you. So much of what we can do here, depends on funding and financing. And, during this morning's conversation, we talked about something that I really want to make sure we highlight in this conversation. It's the $13 million program that you and Rick talked about, your collaboration with Penvest, which is your local investment authority. But you did a grantor program, but how could you have done that? How did it work? And I mean, it just seemed amazing and so many opportunities there. Tell a little bit more about that.
So we really wanted to encourage or incentivize property owners to also incorporate green infrastructure and proper stormwater management on their properties. There's just not a lot of public projects that we could do to impact the amount of overflow that we were creating to our local rivers. So we put together a program with our SRF, our state revolving fund program, and they provided a $13 million low interest loan at 1% for 20 years. And half of that $13 million we used to fund our public projects, but the other half of that $13 million we provided to property owners in the way of grants. We would fund 90% of the differential between their whatever, if they were doing a driveway with standard pavement, asphalt, the differential to make that green infrastructure or porous pavement, we would fund 90% of that. And on the flip side, at the end of the project, they would get a credit against their stormwater fee for incorporating green infrastructure. So that credit program helped with the additional maintenance that they would have of that green infrastructure after it was completed. But we saw a lot of private property owners who took advantage of that 90% grant.
So Charlotte, I'm going to stay on you. Your two takeaways at the end of it. Do you want to elaborate? Because I want to just call them out.
Sure. I talked about that it's really important to have some continuing funding to fund a program, a green infrastructure program, like a stormwater fee. Stormwater fees they're much more effective for funding a green infrastructure program long term. Grant funding, can dry up after a couple of years. Grant funders have lots of other communities that they want to help. So a stormwater fee will really help be more equitable, because the property owners that are generating the most stormwater and contributing to the problem in the community is paying for that program long term. But also, it's creating that recurring funding stream after the grant funding. Use that grant funding in the first initial years, but that stormwater fee program is very important long term.
Thanks, Charlotte. So Ken, going to you in the middle here. You asked a question of Mayor Gray, and I want that repeated for everybody because I think it was important. You asked a question about safe and friendly. Could you ask it again? And I'll ask Mayor Gray to summarize his response.
Sure. It's an issue with downtowns and anywhere where people wonder about the safety and how friendly it is, how secure. And so there's an attitude about it. Is the infrastructure programs that you've developed, have they made an impact on how people perceive safe and friendly in the context of what the downtown is like?
Oh, the response is absolutely. First of all, we did streetscape, which incorporated as much as possible green infrastructure. We did that at no cost to the merchants. But in addition, we did a lighting program. I always would tell people, what do cars have that people don't? It's headlights. So we said, why don't we light the sidewalks instead of street lights? Why don't we do sidewalk lights? And we lit up downtown. Between the streetscape and the lighting, we made the place feel safer. It was brighter at night. It wasn't dark. It just was bright and wide open. That brought more people into downtown. More people into downtown meant more merchants into downtown. I tell people local government's job is to cut the grass, level a sidewalk and get out of here, level the playing field and get out of the way. And that's pretty much what we did. We cleaned up the area, we lit it up. People came, felt comfortable without any more police than we had before. They felt more comfortable, and while they were there, merchants were there to sell their wares.
Perfect, thanks. So my next question is for Russ. Russ, when I asked you your takeaways, your advice you would give based on your experience, and you also spoke about the engagement with the commercial businesses. Can you elaborate on your takeaways and emphasize the connection with the business?
Sure. So the first two that I'll speak about real quick are just A is picking the right green infrastructure for the community. Get to know what they are capable of maintenance wise. All the time I see big capital projects being built, and towns appropriate funds to build whether it's a large sewer or whatever it is. But then you're adding infrastructure and assets to your inventory, but you don't do anything about the staffing to maintain it. Obviously, with more infrastructure becomes more maintenance, especially with green infrastructure. It does typically require elevated maintenance. So there has to be a commitment to maintain whatever type, whether it's porous or whatever type of technology you select. The second item is that when you approach a redevelopment project, you want to try to capture as many attractive features as you can. Obviously, from an environmental standpoint, green infrastructure helps reduce the pollution and the impact to the receiving water bodies that get the stormwater runoff. But if you can incorporate things like Mayor Gray mentioned, if you make it safer, if you do complete streets, wayfinding, something like that, it's really makes it very advantageous. But lastly is the communication with the businesses. I mean, every DPW director out there, they get the phone calls, someone complaining about, what's this construction in front of my house? It seems like there's always this historically a lack of communication between the private and public with these projects. By being proactive and knocking on doors and sending out mailers, repeatedly going up to meet with residents, handing out my personal cell phone number, call me anytime, that sort of thing, they felt like they were very, very involved. And it turns someone that's typically cautious about a project into an advocate for the project, because those people started talking to their friends and their residents, and a positive buzz just started happening about the whole project. We started seeing that, you know, the first phase was a kind of a learning curve. The second phase was a little better, but then in phases 3 and 4, you know, it was a great experience just working with the residents. And again, when you do a roadway project, when you work up to the limits of the roadway, you're abutting private property. There has to be a transition, a tie-in right there, or else it looks very out of place. If something's brand new, you know, you want to do your best to kind of bring everything together. So we made a significant effort with that. Keeping the homeowners and the business owners in the loop was probably the most valuable aspect of this project. By the time we got to phase 4, people were just go ahead and do it. You know, phase 1, it was all sorts of concerns, but it was really I say time consuming in a good way. It was well worth it. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so thank you. Ken, this is your moment. So this morning you heard a lot, you and your colleagues heard a lot of information, a lot of great information. What were some of your key takeaways here?
The key takeaways for me were that we have to have the infrastructure in place if we're going to try to attract the kind of development that we want. And to do that, we have to develop a phased plan that includes the option for multiple sources of funding to make it happen. That we have to play off of what we can start with and build on that to create that kind of downtown atmosphere that people will be attracted to. If we're going to build more residential in the downtown, we're going to be wanting to have it feel like a high quality environment in the area. So that comes from innovative design and the green infrastructure that makes people feel more comfortable in their environment.
Ken, thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and I'm trying to keep us on time, what I'd love to do is welcome questions. You can put the questions, as Tess said in the beginning, in the question function. But I want to allow Dan, I know do you have a question, Dan, or a comment you wanted to make?
Well, I have a couple, and they're for Mayor Gray and Charlotte. One of the things you said, Mayor, was toward the end of the morning discussion, when you came into office, part of your economic development strategy was to have vacant storefronts that were in your downtown area filled. And I think what you said when you left office, that was entirely the case, that you couldn't recall a vacant storefront. And so at the very least, your green infrastructure program did not hamper economic recovery and advancement in the city. And at best, it played an integral role in that process. And I'm wondering if you could just let us know where in that continuum do you see green infrastructure and its impact on Lancaster City?
Well, green infrastructure and downtown development went hand in hand. Again, because everything we did downtown, we had it reviewed for green infrastructure. For example, sidewalk lights, boulevard lights. How much energy do you save? Is that green infrastructure? Well, we certainly told people it was green infrastructure. The electric bill that we paid for our lighting, our sidewalk lighting, was reduced, and the lighting was actually improved. So we made downtown more hospitable, for lack of a better term or lack of a better word. And when it came that way, I live right downtown and have lived downtown for 50 years. There was a time when at night I would walk home from my office and I was the only person on the block. That was it. Now that made other people feel uncomfortable. I had become used to it. There's no time like that now in downtown Lancaster. I don't care what time of the night you go downtown. There will be people walking around, going to restaurants, going to bars, when we used to have restaurants and bars. hopefully we'll have them again. But it changed it completely. It changed the feeling completely. People from outside the city in the more rural areas of the county has about 600,000 people in it, were afraid to come to the city. That changed. That changed. It took a while for it to change, but they felt comfortable in the city. They didn't feel threatened. So it absolutely had an effect, to the extent of 1 out of 3 storefronts being empty to, when I left office, there were people that would come to me and were looking to move something downtown and couldn't find a space.
That's great.
Thank you.
And also, Joanne, I think
Yep.
at some point we during this conversation, the little time we have left is going back to our friends from Provincetown and talking about the link between stormwater management, which is almost always considered or often considered to be a water quality issue, with the quantity problem that is certainly Provincetown is uniquely exposed to, but I would suggest the entire Cape Cod is uniquely exposed to. And really what we're talking about is climate resilience with stormwater. So it'd be great to hear from them on that issue. But before we go there, Charlotte, I just have a quick question for you. Mayor Gray is no longer in office. You, after his term ended, you moved to another community, and something we hear all the time in our work, and Joanne and I have been working on these issues for the last 20 years, and literally without fail, every community we work in says it's different here. What worked somewhere else is not going to work here. We're totally different. And at first, so for those of you who are from Cape Cod, I'm in Maryland. I'm not from that area. And at first we heard people in Cape Cod say Cape Cod is different. And then we heard communities in Cape Cod say we're different than all the other communities in Cape Cod. So it just kind of whittles itself down. You left Lancaster City. You came to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Now, there's some big, very real similarities between those communities, but one difference is Harrisburg was in terrible condition financially when you arrived. And I'm wondering if you can just spend a minute or two talking about how what you learned in Lancaster City is or is not working in Harrisburg, so that we can understand that we're all a community here and we're all different, yet we can all take advantage of these systems and how they hit the ground.
Yeah, Dan, I've been asked to speak in many communities about the Green Infrastructure Program in Lancaster, and I hear that same thing, that every community feels that they're different. But when I came to Harrisburg, it's ironic that I'm now in Harrisburg, because it was probably 5 or 6 years ago that Harrisburg officials came to Lancaster to learn about our Green Infrastructure Program, so that they could try and replicate it in Harrisburg. And they're right on the Susquehanna River. So they had a lot of beach closures on City Island where they have a lot of recreational activities. So they understand the impact that stormwater has on the Susquehanna River, on recreational opportunities, just not on as well as water quality issues. So they've developed a program, a 25-year program that will probably last even longer than that, to incorporate green infrastructure into their landscape all across the city. So I'm happy to be working on that program now, to develop projects like we did in Lancaster, that will really improve the economic development opportunities within Harrisburg as well. Because as you said, they're in financial distress, and they have been for quite a number of years. So we're really hoping that this program will boost the economic development opportunities within the capital of Pennsylvania.
Thanks. Dan, you raised a good question before, but I want to address a few questions that are coming in from the chat. Kyle, do you want to pick a couple and tee us up?
Yep. We have a bunch coming in on maintenance. So I'm thinking, if some of them are kind of geared towards Provincetown. So if Rich or Russ could talk a little bit more about the maintenance there. But there was also one focusing on maintenance of residential or private commercial green infrastructure. So maybe if someone from Lancaster could talk about how, I know they were incentivizing private residences or business owners to incorporate green infrastructure, but how did they secure that maintenance? So I guess we can start with Russ or Rich from Provincetown.
Sure. So for the porous asphalt that we did, again, it's you want to make sure you're not designing something that won't be properly maintained by the owner in the future. So one of the nice things about working with Provincetown on Commercial Street, just given the summertime traffic out there and how the population for the for the weekends, the summertime tourists, the town already swept the streets quite frequently with the vacuum sweeper. So that is recommended. A fairly robust sweeping schedule with porous asphalt is required. So the town, they already did that, so it wasn't a tremendous burden for them to continue to do it with the porous asphalt. I mean, that's the main component to the maintenance with the porous asphalt. On top of that, we also installed a series of catch basin gutter inlets, and infiltration trenches as redundant drainage, which have the typical maintenance of annual cleaning, inspections, things like that. We were careful in the design to make sure that we included points to flush out subsurface drain lines if we needed to, if for some reason they ever got filled up with debris. But really the vacuum sweeping is paramount with the porous asphalt, and it can't be twice a year. It's, in some cases it can be either weekly or monthly. So it's really best for the host community that has it to own a vacuum sweeper that's capable for the maintenance. Rich, am I leaving anything out?
No, I think you're spot on. Just to give people a little insight about our operations, we do sweep our downtown area 7 days a week. The outlying in the phase 2, 3, and 4 areas, we sweep once a week. During the winter time, we will try to get out when the temperatures are seasonable enough where we can get a vacuum sweeper out. But it is definitely probably the most demanding maintenance part of any kind of porous pavement project, is just being able to sweep and keep it up. I would say that the only other maintenance caveat is when you have to open up and do an excavation in the roadway, whether it be water main, water service. Typically, porous pavement is not prepared on a regular basis at your neighboring asphalt plant. So sometimes you got to key up with other neighboring communities that might be having a porous pavement project going on in order to do your trench patches. So you might have to patch with a traditional pavement for a short time, and then once you piggyback onto a neighboring community with a porous pavement project, you can repair those patches.
So Charlotte, as Joanne said, Kyle said, there was a question about how to incentivize private activity, not just to implement and install these practices, but to operate and maintain them. But Joanne, there was another question here that I think we could piggyback on that for Charlotte, which was, were you able to leverage nonprofit and citizen groups to help with some of these messaging issues, to get them to participate in these issues, including maintaining, by the way, which is a big problem? And how important, so the first part of the question is, how were you able to incentivize this activity? But then how were you also able to use citizen groups, nonprofits, and environmental groups to help get the message out there?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the grant program that we developed, if a private property owner took that grant funding, they had to sign an operation and maintenance agreement with us. Typically they last 20 and up to 40 years, depending on the facility. But that operation and maintenance agreement, they're basically agreeing to maintain that and to allow the city to inspect, to come on their property and inspect to ensure that they are maintaining it properly. As I mentioned, the stormwater fee that we implemented, there was a credit program. So if a property owner does manage stormwater on their property, they received a credit against the stormwater fee. And that credit, that is an annual credit, that credit amount is looked at, is viewed to allow them to maintain that green infrastructure. So that credit helps offset their additional cost for maintaining that facility. And we did use environmental groups. We actually contracted with a local land conservation agency to help message and educate the public about our green infrastructure program. We felt that that message came better from an environmental group rather than from city officials. So we did contract with a local agency to help develop our website, get information out about our projects, and really educate the public about the stormwater program.
Okay, thank you. Kyle, was there any other pressing questions we want to get to? We've got about 5 minutes left and we will end on time.
Got it. I just saw one that came in, it's kind of, good for this moment that we're in, asking about, if there was any tie to equity or environmental justice. So if there's anything, that we've seen related to that, or maybe any opportunities for future projects to get tied into environmental justice.
So I can speak that both Lancaster and Harrisburg are both environmental justice communities. So a lot of our grant funding was geared towards the environmental justice. We highlighted where we were going to do those projects in some of the lower income areas of our cities. And so we did tie those grant applications to the environmental justice benefits.
Well, in fact, we did a huge parking lot in a low-income area of our city, and did it with infiltration in mind. Within a year, a community from that neighborhood came to us and wanted to redo a small private park that they had, the Peace Park, and we're able to get private funding, and we of course assisted them. But that community was every bit as interested in the environmental nature of what was going on in their community as high-income communities. So it, it had an effect.
Joanne, I think you're muted.
Oh man, I can't believe I did it. Sorry. Dan's laughing at me. Okay, so with the last couple minutes we have left, I'd love to see if there are any additional takeaways now that we have time to process what happened this morning. Things you didn't get to say this morning, you'd love to quickly share right now. Rich, put you on the spot. Anything else that we didn't talk about you'd love to just share?
I would just probably add that, when you look at these environmental projects, there are a lot of co-benefits to it. And I think as a community, you got to look at those and really see how you can sell these projects to your community, because they do have lasting impacts. So you definitely want to look at that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ. Now you covered it all. Okay. Rick.
Well, the one thing I'd say is incorporate green infrastructure in everyday, every way projects, and stack funding. Stack funding. That's the way you can get a lot done with a little bit of money from here, there, and everywhere. You end up with enough to finance a good project.
Excellent. Okay, Charlotte, bring us home.
I would say don't underestimate the public education component of a program like this. It's so important, and people really do get it. We often think that these engineering projects that are really complicated and take so long to get to construction, that people won't understand it. But people really do care about the environment. They really connect to their local waterways and recreational opportunities. So, don't be afraid to talk about the problem, first of all. Talk about the problem that water quality issues create, and tie these projects to those co-benefits and how you can really get so much out of these projects in addition to the water quality benefits.
Thank you. So thank you to all our guests. So for Ken, representing Wareham, what I'd like to just say is we, in the SNEP network, we have started this process and a leadership exchange. I hope today wasn't too overwhelming for you and your team, but there was a lot of good information. We certainly are going to synthesize this and others. So what you see on your screen, folks, is we are not done with Wareham. We are bringing another leadership exchange for let's see, it is dated November 4th. If you have nothing to do a day after the election, please join us. We will be talking about integrating action planning for climate, social, and economic resilience. We're trying to take really key points and important pieces of information. That will be with the City of Annapolis, the City of Hoboken, and New Bedford, Massachusetts. Then we have another one on December 2nd, revitalizing waterfront communities through comprehensive redevelopment, where we'll have Boston and Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Burlington, Vermont. And then we have the fourth one in our series, which is smart growth and strategic zoning for livable communities on January 6th with Ranson, West Virginia, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and Portland, Maine. I thank you, everyone. It's exactly 2 o'clock. I will see all of our guests soon, I hope. And Ken, we'll see you and your team soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.